Will Bitcoin treasury companies cause the next bubble? We have seen a ton of companies hopping into Bitcoin this year, which is awesome, but this is leading to a fear that this is going to be the next catalyst for a big boom and bust with Bitcoin, right? Where we get to a certain point with Bitcoin and then the bubble pops and we see a huge price decline. So in this video, we are going to be breaking down if these Bitcoin treasury companies are going to cause the next Bitcoin bubble. Before we get into it, please make sure to like the video and also subscribe to the YouTube. Really appreciate your support. I'm also going to put a QR code down below for a Bitcoin tip. So if you want to support the channel, feel free to leave me a little tip. Now let's get into it. This has been the year of Bitcoin treasury companies, guys. It seems like every day we see a new company hopping into Bitcoin and starting to stack, and ultimately that is a great thing. The more companies that come into Bitcoin and start stacking, the more demand we see for Bitcoin, and over time that pushes the price higher. At the end of the day, Bitcoin is pretty simple. It's supply and demand. We know the supply, we know the supply schedule, so we just have to measure the demand, and we are seeing a ton of demand at the corporate level. Now, why have we seen so many companies decide to come into Bitcoin this year? Well, for one, the price has continued to go up, and companies see how this is working out for another company like MicroStrategy, who has made a lot of money by stacking Bitcoin, and they say, hey, why aren't we doing this? They're watching other companies have success with this, and other companies are deciding to FOMO in. Now, we also saw that we got a new administration this year, the Trump administration, who is very pro-Bitcoin. We're seeing positive legislation for Bitcoin. We now have a strategic national Bitcoin reserve. We're seeing state Bitcoin reserves. We're seeing positive legislation for Bitcoin go through the government right now with the Bitcoin Act. So companies are seeing that there's going to be a good environment for Bitcoin here in the US, and there is a lot of positive sentiment, and they're deciding to hop in right now because they can see what is happening here. They can see that adoption is going to continue to grow and acceptance is going to continue to grow. Let's go ahead and take a look at a little visual here which shows the top 100 Bitcoin treasury companies. As you can see, at number 1 we have MicroStrategy, who has a ton of Bitcoin. They have almost 600,000 Bitcoin. They actually might already have it. It says 592,000 on this visual here, but they stack Bitcoin every week, so this visual might not be 100% updated. After that, we could see Marathon Digital with around 50,000 Bitcoin. So MicroStrategy has a huge lead on every other company when it comes to stacking Bitcoin, and I don't know if we'll see any other company pass them up. However, we do have new entrants in the space trying to do that. We saw the formation of 21 Capital a couple of months ago, which is going to be headed by Jack Mallers. He's going to be the CEO, and they have the same goal, to stack as much Bitcoin as possible. And it seems like a lot of these companies who hop into Bitcoin and start stacking, they start to up their allocation. They start to get more aggressive with their strategy, which is awesome, right? The more we see these companies buying up Bitcoin, that's going to lead to a higher price. Now, how are these Bitcoin treasury companies acquiring their Bitcoin? They're using a couple of different methods. So let's go ahead and get into those. The most popular method we're seeing is these companies are issuing convertible debt. Now, if you're not familiar with convertible debt is basically debt that can be converted into equity or stock at a future point in time. So how this works is these debt investors who are buying the convertible debt, they realize that these companies who are issuing it are going to buy Bitcoin with that debt. And if they believe in Bitcoin, they believe that the Bitcoin price is going to go higher, which means it's going to send the stock price for these companies higher if they're acquiring a lot of Bitcoin. And then once the stock price is higher, these debt investors will be able to convert their debt into equity and get all that upside. So really, convertible debt is an indirect investment in Bitcoin. And the great part about this convertible debt for these companies who are issuing it is that because there's all that upside with the Bitcoin, with the fact that these debt investors can convert it into equity, that means that these debt investors are willing to accept lower interest payments. So a lot of these companies like MicroStrategy are able to issue this convertible debt at interest rates close to zero. And that's a big win for them. them, right? If they don't have to make all these interest payments, then it's much easier for them to handle the debt. The thing about this convertible debt is that the strategy is really dependent on the Bitcoin price continuing to head higher. If we were to see the Bitcoin price fall for an extended period of time and companies out there didn't have their debt structured very well, some of them could be in trouble. Let's think about this, for example. Let's say that the Bitcoin price were to shoot up to $500,000, maybe with all these companies buying Bitcoin or nation states buying Bitcoin. We saw a huge spike in the Bitcoin price, goes up to 500K. And then let's say you have new companies coming in and they start issuing convertible debt to buy Bitcoin, and the debt has a maturity of 2 years. But then let's say something happens in the Bitcoin space, something very bad, and the Bitcoin price falls down to around 100K to 200K for 3 years. And these companies have issued this debt that's due in 2 years. Well, if they take a ton of losses on their Bitcoin holdings and they're unable to pay off their debts, they're going to have, for one, they're going to have to sell their Bitcoin to pay off their debts. But a lot of these Bitcoin treasury companies would probably be insolvent as well, right? If we did see an extended decline in the Bitcoin price and they just weren't able to pay off this debt. Now, I think that a lot of people, including me, think that the Bitcoin price is going to continue heading higher, and the chances of us seeing a very significant bear market in Bitcoin where something very bad happens, I think that's pretty unlikely. But if it were to happen and these companies did not have their debt structured very well, they could be forced to sell. That further contributes to the Bitcoin price going down. Now, if companies are able to set up their debt well, like MicroStrategy has done, and have a longer maturity, typically Bitcoin goes up a lot over the long term. And if you're not having interest payments, then you should be in the clear. We saw back in 2022 that when Bitcoin went through this bear market, MicroStrategy ended up surviving, right? And not only surviving, but thriving, right? They were able to handle that volatility in the price to the downside because of the way their debt was structured. So really, I think the main danger here is if companies don't have a good strategy and they don't structure their debt well. Some other ways that companies are acquiring more Bitcoin is they're issuing new shares at the market. So they're expanding the supply of their stock and using that new stock money to purchase more Bitcoin. Some companies are using their excess cash reserves, right? They have money sitting in cash. And why would you leave your money sitting in cash when you could convert it into Bitcoin, which is better money, which holds its value better over time? We're also seeing companies using some of their revenue to buy Bitcoin. So if companies are seeing a lot of revenue, they're seeing a lot of profit, they can use a portion of that profit to buy Bitcoin. Companies can mine Bitcoin if they want to get into that. Of course, we're seeing more competition with Bitcoin mining, and the Bitcoin reward is going down over time. However, we're seeing the Bitcoin price going up over time. So we're seeing companies incentivized to do this, as well as nation states and other entities. And we can also think about companies using other forms of debt to acquire Bitcoin, although this convertible debt has been the main strategy. Now, looking at these Bitcoin treasury companies in a negative light, saying that they're going to cause the next Bitcoin bubble, I don't think that's really the right way to think about this. Anytime you have more players coming into the Bitcoin space and pushing up demand, I think that is a good thing, right? And when we think about it, all entities are incentivized to hold Bitcoin. Why? Because it's a better form of money. It has basically perfected those properties of money that we want to see. And for that reason, every individual like you or I, every company and every nation state is going to want to hold Bitcoin. So it makes sense that we're seeing all these companies decide to hold better money. With these Bitcoin treasury companies coming in and buying up Bitcoin, it may push up the Bitcoin price a lot higher and then it may fall down. But I don't really think that's a bad thing, right? Let's say we continue to see these Bitcoin treasury companies stack and more come in, and it pushes up the Bitcoin price to $1 million, and and then it falls down to $500,000, well, that means we've still gone from $100,000 to $500,000, and I'll be a happy man. So to answer the question of this video, do I think that Bitcoin treasury companies are going to cause the next bubble? No, I don't. I think that these Bitcoin treasury companies are pushing up demand. It's bringing more capital into this Bitcoin space, and that's going to push up the price a lot. And when we have volatility with the price going higher, it's going to go up and down as it tries to find, that market price. But that's fine. That's natural, right? So if the price gets pushed up a lot higher and maybe some of these Bitcoin treasury companies decide to sell when it goes to a higher price, I think that makes sense, right? Sometimes when you make a lot of money, you want to spend some of that money, or you want to do something with it, and that's just natural. So we have to think about what would cause some of these Bitcoin treasury companies to sell. Now, let's say we saw a big decline in the Bitcoin price. Let's say that I'm wrong and Bitcoin doesn't go up to $1 million, right? Let's say that Bitcoin goes through an extended bear market. Maybe people need to sell their Bitcoin to pay off their debts, some of these Bitcoin treasury companies. And because of that, that would actually lead to the Bitcoin price going down further, which would cause more companies to probably sell their Bitcoin to pay off their debt. So that could be a bad scenario for Bitcoin. If we had a black swan event, or something happened to the decentralization of Bitcoin, or something messed with the integrity of Bitcoin and people lost trust in it, then we could see these Bitcoin treasury companies sell to pay off their debts. We could also see, let's say the Bitcoin price does go up a lot of these companies may want to do stuff with their gains, right? If Bitcoin goes up to $1 million per coin, then I'm sure a lot of companies may want to upgrade their headquarters or upgrade their business in another way, or, use some of those gains to pay for something else. Or maybe if they think they're smart enough, they may want to arbitrage the market, right? If Bitcoin goes up to $1 million and they think that maybe it's a little overvalued and they think it's going to go down, they might want to sell it there. And then once it goes back down, they may want to buy back in. So naturally, when assets go up, you see people want to sell and use those gains for something. Another thing we can think about is maybe some of these Bitcoin treasury companies really don't quite understand Bitcoin yet, and maybe some of them are still thinking in dollar terms. So let's say the Bitcoin price shoots up to $1 million. Maybe some of these companies see that and they say, oh, I gotta sell this Bitcoin now because I could have $1 million, right? But the thing about this is, let's say you sell your Bitcoin and you sell it for cash, then you just have that cash sitting there and it's going to be depreciating away. So I really think this is something that maybe people need to think about more with Bitcoin, is the fact that I don't really see a huge incentive to sell out of it, even if the price goes up in dollar terms. And I really think the only reason that you would want to sell your Bitcoin is if you have something worth trading it for, right? Whether that is a new building for your company, or a car, or like something you want, or maybe you want to start a business, maybe there's a stock that you're big on. But I really just don't see the incentive to sell Bitcoin for cash. So I think that is going to be something that keeps a lot of people in Bitcoin as Bitcoin adoption grows. And as we see merchants and people start to accept Bitcoin as payment, then I think people are going to start to think, why do I need cash at all, right? If I can just pay for everything in Bitcoin and it's going to hold its value and I can store my wealth there, then I don't really need dollars at all if I can just pay in Bitcoin. So I think that eventually we will see Bitcoin used as more of a medium of exchange, and that is going to stop people from selling out of Bitcoin and into cash, which is something that leads to price declines, right? If people are selling out of Bitcoin and into cash, that means that the dollar is going up and Bitcoin is going down against the dollar. That's going to wrap it up for this one. In conclusion, I think that Bitcoin treasury companies are ultimately great for Bitcoin Bitcoin. It's just more players coming into the Bitcoin space and pushing up demand. Now with that increase in demand, that might push up the price a lot higher, and from that point we may see the price correct downward, but I don't really think that's a bad thing. I just think that's a natural progression that we're going to see with Bitcoin. We're going to see it shoot up in price with more demand, and we're going to see it fall back down as people get a little bit overhyped, and then it will shoot back up again and come back down. This is just all part of Bitcoin's journey to becoming the dominant monetary asset out there. If you didn't like and subscribe, please make sure to do that now. Thanks for watching. I'll be back soon.